"Don't get in the car!" The shout cut through the crisp morning air like a crack of thunder. Conversations in the parking lot froze, heads turned. A dozen well-dressed executives, clutching their leather briefcases and checking their watches, stopped mid-stride. The voice belonged to a boy, small, breathless, desperate. 12-year-old Malik Johnson darted out from the lobby doors of Kingsley Global Holdings, his sneakers splashing against puddles left by last night's rain. His eyes, wide with urgency, locked onto the man about to enter a gleaming black Bentley. Jonathan Kingsley, the 52-year-old CEO whose name carried weight across the city, froze with one hand on the gold-plated handle. A frown creased his face. Around him, two security guards stiffened, instantly moving to intercept the boy. "Hold him back," barked the head of security. But Malik was fast. His legs pumped furiously, his arms waving, every fiber of his small body straining to reach the car before it was too late. His breath came in ragged bursts, steam curling in the cold air. "Please, sir, don't go in." The command startled everyone. Executives exchanged puzzled glances, their expressions sliding quickly into irritation. Who was this child to interrupt the start of their day? For a fleeting moment, the scene felt surreal. Polished shoes reflecting the neon lights overhead, the faint hum of engines, and at the center of it all, a boy in worn clothes facing the most powerful man in the company. Kingsley turned slowly, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Malik, dark-skinned, panting, trembling, yet refusing to back down. It was the first time in 15 years that Kingsley had even noticed him. Malik had been there countless nights, quietly accompanying his mother, Naomi, the invisible cleaning lady who left before dawn so the offices sparkled when executives arrived. But to men like Kingsley, she and her son had always been background noise. Until now. "What on earth is this?" Kingsley muttered, his voice edged with annoyance. His morning schedule was packed with investor calls and board meetings, none of which included listening to a boy shout warnings in front of an audience of senior staff. Malik knew he had only seconds before the guards dragged him away. His chest heaved, but his eyes blazed with determination stronger than fear. "Sir, I saw them last night," he pleaded, his voice cracking but clear. "They were tampering with your car." Silence fell, heavier than the clouds above. The executives shifted uncomfortably, some scoffing, others staring at Kingsley for his reaction. Was this some prank, a desperate stunt? But Jonathan Kingsley's hand slipped off the Bentley's handle. A chill snaked up his spine. Something about the boy's desperation, his trembling hands, his tear-rimmed eyes, rang with unsettling truth. The boy who was never supposed to matter now stood between him and a choice. Ignore the interruption and risk humiliation, or listen, if only for a moment. Executives muttered impatiently. One vice president adjusted his silk tie and hissed, "Jonathan, surely you're not going to waste time on this nonsense." Kingsley raised a single hand, silencing him. His gaze locked on Malik. "What exactly did you see, son?" Malik swallowed hard, his voice steadying as every executive leaned in despite themselves. And just like that, the invisible boy had forced the most powerful man in the company to listen. The parking lot was silent, all eyes fixed on Malik. The boy's chest still heaved, his voice echoing in the stunned quiet. Jonathan Kingsley's sharp gaze lingered on him, waiting. Malik glanced nervously at the executives, men and women in tailored suits whose faces carried impatience and disbelief. He swallowed, then pointed a trembling finger toward the Bentley. "Last night, when my mom was cleaning on the 50th floor, I was downstairs in the lobby doing my homework. I saw two men come into the garage. They weren't supposed to be there. They stayed under your car for a long time." His words fell heavy. Executives shifted uncomfortably, muttering under their breath. "Two men in suits," Malik continued, "one with a scar shaped like a crescent here," he touched his forehead, "and the other tall, bald, with a snake tattoo on his neck." The description sent a ripple through Kingsley. For an instant, the CEO's face betrayed something, recognition, perhaps even fear, before he quickly masked it behind a businessman's stern expression. From the crowd, James Carter, vice president of sales, let out an exasperated laugh. His silver cufflinks caught the morning light as he tugged at his tie. "Jonathan, are we really doing this? Listening to ghost stories from a janitor's kid? We have investors waiting. This is beneath us." The disdain in his tone burned. Executives smirked, some nodding, as if Malik's presence was an inconvenience that needed to be swept aside like dust from the marble floors. But Malik didn't retreat. His eyes flicked toward Kingsley, then back at Carter. "I know what I saw. I know every sound in this building. I can tell when something doesn't belong. Last night, something didn't." The boy's words landed with a quiet conviction that unsettled even those who wanted to dismiss him. At that moment, the side door burst open. Naomi Johnson rushed in, still in her faded blue cleaning uniform. Her hands trembled as she pulled Malik close. "Malik, what are you doing?" Her voice cracked with both fear and shame. She looked up at the circle of executives, her eyes wide with dread. "Mr. Kingsley, I'm so sorry. He's just a child. He doesn't understand." Malik gently pulled free from his mother's grip, his voice steady. "Mom, I can't let him get in that car." Naomi froze, caught between the desperate courage in her son's eyes and the oppressive weight of the men towering over them. For 15 years, she had cleaned the offices of Kingsley Global Holdings, arriving when the city slept, leaving before dawn. She had kept everything immaculate, floors polished, windows gleaming, yet never once had anyone thanked her by name. To them, she was invisible. And now her son was risking everything to be heard. Kingsley studied her, then looked at Malik again. His voice softened, surprising everyone. "Mrs. Johnson, your son believes there's danger. I think we should hear him out." A hush fell. Executives blinked in disbelief. Carter let out a bitter scoff. "This is absurd, Jonathan. Every minute wasted here costs us millions. Do you really think a boy's wild imagination deserves your attention?" But Kingsley ignored him. His mind replayed Malik's description: scar, tattoo, the mention of Thursday. He remembered the phone call from last week, the veiled threat after he had refused to sell a critical piece of land for a controversial project called Riverside Prime. Now the boy's story didn't feel like imagination. It felt like confirmation. The wind carried the faint hum of traffic from the city beyond the steel gates. Inside the parking lot, time seemed to stand still. Kingsley's pulse quickened, but his face remained composed. "Malik," he said quietly, his tone respectful now, "did you hear anything they said?" The boy nodded. One of them said, "Problem solved by Thursday." The other laughed. "And today is Thursday." The executives fell silent. Even Carter's confident smirk faltered, just for a moment. Naomi's hand clutched her son's shoulder, torn between fear and pride. She lowered her gaze, whispering, 15 years I've worked here, Mr. Kingsley. He's grown up in these halls. He sees things none of us notice, because no one ever looks at him." Her words hung in the cold morning air. For the first time in a long while, Jonathan Kingsley felt something stir inside him. Gratitude towards someone who had nothing to gain from protecting him. Gratitude, and the unsettling awareness that perhaps his company, his empire, had been blind to the very people who kept it standing. The uneasy silence from Malik's revelation didn't last. James Carter's sharp voice sliced through the stillness like a whip. "Enough of this," he barked, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement as he strode toward Kingsley. "Jonathan, you're letting a child dictate the agenda of this company. Investors are flying in as we speak, and you're wasting time on fairy tales." A murmur of agreement rippled through the executives. Several checked their watches with exaggerated sighs, eager to move on. But their eyes betrayed something else too, contempt for the boy who had dared to interrupt their ordered world. Malik clenched his fists, his knuckles whitening. His sneakers squeaked slightly against the asphalt, but his stance didn't falter. "I know what I saw," he said firmly, his voice trembling only at the edges. Carter sneered, lowering his gaze until he was almost nose to nose with the boy. "And what makes you think anyone should believe you? You're a kid who hangs around at night while your mother cleans up after us. You don't belong in this conversation." Naomi's cheeks burned crimson. She pulled at Malik's arm, whispering, "Please, let's go." Her instinct was to protect him, to avoid making things worse, but Malik didn't move. His eyes locked on Kingsley. "Sir, I don't care if they believe me. I only care that you're safe." The simplicity of the words cut through the arrogant swirling in the air. Kingsley's lips pressed into a thin line. He studied the boy, then the car, then Carter's scowling face. "Jonathan," Carter pressed on, seizing the pause, "if you indulge this nonsense, you'll look weak. Do you want our Japanese investors to hear you postponed meetings because of a janitor's son making up stories? Think about what that will do to the company's credibility." The words were calculated, heavy with threat. Around them, a few executives nodded, but Kingsley still didn't move toward the car. His instincts, sharpened over decades in business, whispered that something was wrong. Malik's voice rose again, urgent but controlled. One of them said the problem would be solved by Thursday. That's today. Please, sir, you can't ignore this. The repetition made even the skeptical executives shift uncomfortably. The boy wasn't backing down. For a moment, the cold morning carried only the sound of distant traffic and the faint buzz of a flickering light overhead. Then Carter exploded again. "This is ridiculous! Are we going to call off multi-million-dollar deals because a 12-year-old is scared of shadows? This company can't afford to indulge childish fantasies." Naomi flinched at his words. She opened her mouth to apologize again, but Kingsley raised his hand gently to stop her. His eyes didn't leave Malik. "You said you know every sound in this building," Kingsley said slowly. "Every corner, every detail no one else notices. Why?" Malik hesitated, then spoke with quiet honesty. "Because when you're invisible, you notice everything. People talk when they think no one's listening. I've heard meetings from hallways, I've seen deals planned in whispers, and last night I saw something I can't ignore." His words landed with surprising weight. A hush spread again, broken only by the shuffle of shoes and the irritated groan Carter couldn't suppress. "Jonathan," Carter snapped, his voice hardening, "if you continue entertaining this, I'll have no choice but to inform the board you're jeopardizing investor confidence. You've already delayed Riverside Prime. Don't let a child be the excuse for further delays." The name, Riverside Prime, made Kingsley stiffen. He hadn't expected Carter to invoke it here, in front of so many witnesses. His mind flickered back to last week's phone call, the veiled threats, the insistence he approved the controversial project. Now Malik's story and Carter's aggression began to overlap in a troubling pattern. Kingsley's jaw tightened. He didn't speak, but his silence was more dangerous than words. Malik sensed the shift. He took a small step forward, his voice dropping to a steady tone that seemed far too mature for a boy his age. "If you get in that car, sir, you won't make it to your meeting. And if I stay quiet, I'll never forgive myself." The declaration hung in the cold air, undeniable. For the first time, some executives exchanged uncertain glances. Doubt had been planted. Carter's face flushed with anger. He turned toward the guards. "Remove him, now!" But Kingsley's voice rang out, calm yet commanding. "No one touches him." The words froze everyone. Carter spun around, incredulous. "Jonathan!" "I want to hear everything," Kingsley said, his tone final. His gaze returned to Malik. "Every word, every detail. Start from the beginning." Malik took a deep breath, steadying himself. He wasn't just being heard, he was being believed. Malik's steady voice filled the crisp air, his words flowing with more certainty now that Jonathan Kingsley had chosen to listen. "I wasn't supposed to hear them," the boy said, "but I was in the lobby finishing my math homework. They didn't see me. One of them said, 'The problem will be solved by Thursday.' The other laughed and said you'd finally learn not to stand in their way." Kingsley's brow furrowed. That single line struck too close to the threatening phone call he had received a week earlier. An anonymous voice warning him about his refusal to approve the Riverside Prime project. His gut tightened. Carter rolled his eyes dramatically, but a flicker of unease crossed his face. "Jonathan, this is absurd. You're connecting imaginary dots. This boy should be in school, not spinning tales to frighten executives." Yet the conviction in Malik's tone was impossible to ignore. His small hands trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of responsibility. "I saw their faces clearly," he pressed on. "One had a scar right here." He touched his forehead. The other had a snake tattoo curling up his neck. A hush fell. Kingsley recognized those descriptions instantly. Marcus Scar Velez and Anthony Viper Kane. Names whispered in real estate circles but never spoken in public. They were known for forcing deals through intimidation, the kind of men Kingsley had worked hard to keep far from his company's spotless image. Now, they weren't just names in rumor. They were tied to his car, his life. Naomi clutched her son's shoulder, her eyes wide with terror. "Malik, enough!" Her voice cracked. "Please don't say more. We can't be involved in this." 15 years of invisibility had taught her one thing: speaking up was dangerous. But Kingsley surprised her. His tone softened, carrying genuine respect. "Mrs. Johnson, your son is braver than most people I know. He saw something we didn't." Naomi blinked, stunned by the shift. For over a decade, she had been the silent figure polishing glass and mopping marble floors, unnoticed by the very men who now stared at her son. And in that moment, Jonathan Kingsley, one of the city's most powerful men, was telling her that invisibility had value. Malik took a breath and continued. "They weren't just messing with the car. They carried a black case and used a special key to open something under it. I heard one of them whisper about a time device." A chill coursed through the crowd. Even the most skeptical executives froze. Carter forced a laugh, but his voice cracked slightly. "This is outrageous. We're letting a boy throw around words like device in front of staff? Jonathan, don't let him manipulate you. There's nothing here but a vivid imagination." But Kingsley's expression was grave. He motioned to his head of security. "Check the car. Now." As guards hurried toward the Bentley, Malik's gaze followed them with the quiet confidence of someone who knew he was right. His heartbeat pounded, but he didn't flinch. For the first time, the boy who had always been overlooked was the center of gravity in a circle of men who commanded millions. Naomi's hand trembled as it found her son's. She whispered, barely audible, "Do you realize what you've done?" Malik didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on Kingsley, who looked back at him with something new in his gaze. Not annoyance, not doubt, but respect. And though no one knew it yet, that moment was the turning point. The CEO who once walked past Malik without a glance was beginning to see him not as invisible, but as indispensable. The security guards returned 10 minutes later, their faces drained of color. The head of security cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. "Mr. Kingsley, we found a device wired into the ignition system, sophisticated. It was set to trigger at 9:15, exactly the time you usually leave for your Thursday meetings." A gasp rippled through the executives. The disbelief on their faces turned to quiet horror. Jonathan Kingsley stood frozen, then slowly turned his gaze toward Malik. The boy's chest still heaved, but his eyes held firm. "You saved my life," Kingsley whispered. Carter staggered back a step, his composure cracking for the first time. "This is impossible. You can't seriously believe?" But Kingsley silenced him with a single look. Enough. He crouched before Malik, placing both hands on the boy's trembling shoulders. "How can I ever thank you?" Malik answered without hesitation, "By finding out who's behind it, because if they tried once, they'll try again." The quiet courage in his tone was undeniable. Naomi covered her mouth with both hands, tears filling her eyes. Kingsley rose, his mind already shifting into sharp calculation. "Carter," he said evenly, "cancel all my meetings. I want everyone in the executive boardroom at 2 o'clock tomorrow. Every investor, every director. No exceptions." Carter paled. "Tomorrow? Jonathan, this is non-negotiable," Kingsley cut him off. "And alert the authorities. They'll want to see this." The next day, tension filled the glass-walled boardroom of Kingsley Global Holdings. The long mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier light, lined with 50 of the city's most powerful investors. Journalists and photographers had been granted special access, their cameras poised like hawks. At the head of the room stood James Carter, impeccably dressed, his silver tie pin glinting. He addressed the crowd with a polished smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, I regret to inform you of a security incident yesterday, but rest assured our leadership remains strong and our path forward is clear." Behind him, a presentation screen displayed slides of the Riverside Prime project, framed as a beacon of urban renewal. Carter's voice grew smoother with every word. "With our CEO recovering from the ordeal, it falls upon me to lead this company decisively. Effective immediately, we will move forward with Riverside, a project destined to transform the city and deliver unmatched returns for our investors." Polite applause spread around the table, though some investors exchanged uncertain glances. Carter's confidence filled the room, until a firm voice cut through. "Not so fast." All heads turned. Jonathan Kingsley stepped through the doors, flanked by Naomi and Malik. His presence alone was enough to silence the applause. Carter blinked, caught off guard. Then he forced a smile. "Jonathan, I'm glad you're here. We were just discussing how to stabilize after yesterday's unfortunate scare." Kingsley's reply was ice cold. "Let's call it what it was, attempted murder." The words cracked across the room like lightning. Murmurs rose instantly. Carter let out a shaky laugh. "You're shaken, Jonathan. It's understandable. Perhaps it's best if you—" Before he could finish, Malik, holding a tablet Kingsley had given him, tapped a key. Instantly, the massive screen behind Carter flickered, and his carefully prepared slides vanished. Replacing them were streams of incriminating emails, Carter's own words filling the screen for all to see. "The Kingsley problem will be resolved Thursday morning. Prepare the succession documents. Riverside will be signed within 24 hours. Gasps filled the boardroom. Carter's face drained of color. "This is a setup. My account was hacked." Malik pressed another key. The speakers crackled, then a recording played. Carter's voice on the phone. "Pay Velez and Kane in full. Once Jonathan's gone, I'll ensure Riverside passes." The silence that followed was suffocating. Investors who had just applauded now recoiled, their eyes wide with outrage. Photographers snapped furiously, capturing Carter's unraveling composure. Kingsley stepped closer, his voice steady as steel. "James, did you truly believe you could destroy me and seize this company in front of the same people who now see your betrayal with their own eyes?" Carter's lips trembled. He turned wildly to the investors. "This boy, this child, he's behind it. None of this is credible. He's just the janitor's kid." All eyes shifted to Malik. The boy, standing small but unshaken, met Carter's glare. His reply was calm, each word clear. "No, you destroyed yourself. I just showed everyone who you really are." The boardroom erupted in whispers. Cameras clicked endlessly. And then, as if on cue, the glass doors opened. Federal agents stepped in, badges flashing. The lead agent spoke firmly. "James Carter, you are under arrest for conspiracy, attempted homicide, and corporate fraud." Gasps turned into stunned silence. Investors watched as Carter's wrists were bound in handcuffs. His polished facade collapsed into desperate shouting. "You don't understand. I built this company as much as Kingsley did. I deserve to lead." No one answered. The agents escorted him out past a wall of flashing cameras. Jonathan Kingsley faced the stunned room. His hand rested on Malik's shoulder as he spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, meet the boy who saved my life, Malik Johnson, son of Naomi Johnson, who has served this company faithfully for 15 years. Without them, none of us would be standing here today." Naomi's tears spilled freely as the room broke into spontaneous applause. For the first time in her life, she was seen, not as a shadow in the night, but as a woman whose work and courage had saved an empire. Malik looked down shyly, the tablet still in his hands, but the smile tugging at his lips was undeniable. The boardroom was still buzzing long after James Carter had been led away in handcuffs. Investors whispered in disbelief, cameras clicked furiously, and the name Malik Johnson spread like wildfire across the room. Jonathan Kingsley remained at the head of the table, one hand still on Malik's shoulder, the other raised for silence. "This company nearly lost everything because we failed to pay attention," he said firmly. "From this moment on, that changes." He turned to the boy and his mother. "Malik, you will serve as a special internal security consultant. Your eyes and instincts are sharper than any system we've built. And Naomi, after 15 years of service in the shadows, you are promoted to operations supervisor, effective immediately, with a salary that reflects your worth." Naomi gasped, her hands trembling. The executives broke into applause, this time genuine. For the first time in her life, Naomi Johnson wasn't invisible. The news spread quickly. By evening, headlines blazed across the city. "CEO saved by cleaner son." "Boardroom coup foiled by 12-year-old." Television anchors marveled at the courage of a boy who had refused to stay silent. Investors who once scoffed now praised Kingsley's decisive leadership. And employees throughout Kingsley Global Holdings looked at their CEO differently, because he had chosen to stand beside a janitor's family instead of sweeping them aside. Most importantly, the Riverside Prime project was canceled permanently. Instead, Kingsley announced the funds would be redirected towards building community centers, affordable housing, and youth programs in the very neighborhoods that Riverside would have displaced. At the press conference, he said, "True progress doesn't come from tearing families apart, but from lifting them up. And it was Malik who reminded me of that." 6 months later, the transformation inside Kingsley Global Holdings was undeniable. Employees who once felt invisible were now part of something new, the Total Visibility Initiative. Janitors, night guards, maintenance crews, all were encouraged to share what they observed. Their insights helped prevent security breaches, uncover inefficiencies, and even spark innovations in workplace safety. At the heart of it all was Malik. The boy who once trailed behind his mother with a backpack of homework now wore a small consultant's badge. He guided executives through hidden corridors, explained blind spots in surveillance, and even delivered presentations to visiting business leaders. His voice, once ignored, now carried weight. Naomi, too, had blossomed. No longer arriving at midnight to clean unnoticed, she oversaw operations with confidence, managing schedules and supervising staff. The same hands that once scrubbed floors now signed policies and reports. She carried herself calmer, her quiet pride reflected in every word. And James Carter? His downfall was complete. Convicted of conspiracy and fraud, he sat in a federal penitentiary, his once gilded life stripped away. Newspaper columns described his fall as a cautionary tale of arrogance meeting accountability. But for Malik, Carter was no longer the focus. The real story was what came next. On a spring afternoon, Kingsley stood in a sunlit community park funded by the reallocated Riverside budget. Children ran laughing through playgrounds, families enjoyed open green spaces, and music drifted from a youth center where free classes were being held. At his side stood Malik and Naomi. Kingsley watched as Malik's younger cousins practiced violin in one of the new classrooms. "This," Kingsley said softly, "is what real investment looks like." Malik nodded, his eyes glowing with pride. "You listened to me when no one else would. Now all of them get to be heard too." Naomi reached for her son's hand, her eyes misty. For years she had carried the weight of invisibility. But now, in this place filled with laughter and light, she knew those years had prepared them for this moment, when invisibility turned into undeniable presence. The story of a cleaner son saving a CEO had traveled far beyond the city. Universities invited Malik to speak, business journals profiled him, and young people from overlooked communities saw themselves in his courage. Kingsley Global Holdings was no longer just a company. It had become a symbol of change, proof that leadership meant more than power and profit. And through it all, Malik remained grounded. When asked by a reporter what gave him the courage to speak up that morning, his answer was simple. "My mom taught me that doing the right thing means speaking up, even if no one listens at first. I just couldn't stay silent." The crowd applauded, touched by the wisdom spoken from a 12-year-old's heart. The sun dipped low over the city, casting a warm amber glow across the new park where families gathered. Children's laughter echoed, blending with the notes of violins drifting from the community center. Jonathan Kingsley stood quietly at the edge of the playground, his gaze fixed not on the skyscrapers that bore his name, but on the children who now have space to dream. Beside him, Naomi watched Malik teaching a younger boy how to adjust his tie before a youth workshop. The sight made her smile through tears. Years of silent labor, nights of invisibility. Every sacrifice had led to this, her son standing tall, not because of wealth or power, but because he had chosen to speak when silence would have been easier. She whispered almost to herself, "Every invisible night prepared us for the day we became impossible to ignore." Kingsley turned at her words, nodding slowly. "And it was your courage, and his, that reminded me what leadership truly means." Malik jogged over, his face bright with determination. "Mom, Mr. Kingsley, do you know what I want to study when I'm older? Business and social justice. I want to build a program that finds hidden talent and people everyone overlooks, because I know what it feels like to be invisible." Naomi's eyes shone as she pulled him close. "And now you'll make sure others never feel that way." The three of them stood together in the fading light, a CEO, a mother, and her son. An unlikely alliance forged not in a boardroom, but in a parking lot on a cold morning when a single boy refused to stay quiet. Months later, during a lecture at a local university, Malik closed his talk with the words that had become his personal motto. "Invisibility can be a curse, or it can be a superpower. It depends on who is willing to pay attention." The auditorium erupted in applause, not for a corporate prodigy, but for the reminder that value is not measured by status, age, or title, but by courage, honesty, and the willingness to act when it matters most. As time passed, the story of the cleaner son spread beyond the city. It became less about corporate intrigue and more about a universal truth, that justice and dignity often rise from the most unexpected places. And so the symbol remained, a boy standing in front of a car, trembling yet unyielding, daring to shout, "Don't get in." It was more than a warning that saved a life. It was a call to see what had always been unseen, to recognize that true strength lies not in silencing the smallest voices, but in amplifying them. Because sometimes the bravest act in the world is simply refusing to stay invisible. In the end, this story reminds us that sometimes the most powerful voices come from those the world overlooks. Malik was invisible until the day he chose to speak up, proving that courage is not measured by age, wealth, or status. Too often, silence allows injustice to grow stronger, but one small act of bravery can change the course of lives. It teaches us to listen more carefully, to the voices at the margins, to the quiet observations of those who see what others miss. As the old Western saying goes, even a whisper can shake the mountains. For us, the lesson is clear. Dignity is not something given by society. It is something we claim by standing firm for what is right. Whether facing prejudice, unfair treatment, or simply the fear of being dismissed, we must remember that truth has its own strength. When we dare to break harmful silence and honor our worth, we not only protect ourselves, but inspire others to do the same. What about you? Have you ever seen someone's courage change the outcome of a situation? Share your thoughts in the comments, like this video to support the message, and subscribe so you won't miss more stories that stir both heart and mind. Wishing you peace, strength, and hope for brighter days ahead.